Subscribe to Ancient Absurdity.
Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into history's most uncomfortable family barbecue, the world of human sacrifice. No, not the dramatic, Hollywood kind with perfect makeup and a hero swooping in at the last second. I mean the real, messy, and frankly baffling practice of giving the gods a human-shaped thank you card. So before you get too comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe to Ancient Absurdity, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. It helps me feel globally connected while I talk about ancient dismemberment. Now, settle in, maybe grab a snack, something that definitely wasn't a neighbor yesterday. And let's ponder for a moment. Have you ever wondered what it was actually like to be on the sacrificial waiting list? Did they offer you a final meal? Or was it just whatever was left over from the priest's lunch? Did anyone ever try to fake a headache to get out of it? Could you survive the sheer awkwardness of being paraded through town as a divine gift? Or would you be more worried about tripping on your ceremonial robe? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in an ancient city. The year is, well, let's just say it's a Tuesday. You're wearing an oddly clean tunic, and someone has just handed you a flower necklace. You have a terrible feeling you've just won a very, very bad lottery. Good luck. You're minding your own business, perhaps trying to figure out if that strange-looking gourd is edible, when two stern-faced priests tap you on the shoulder. They're not here to ask for directions. There's a strange mix of pity and excitement in their eyes as they inform you that the gods are thirsty, and you, my friend, are the designated beverage. There's no RSVP, no +1, and definitely no declining the invitation. The moment hangs in the hot, dusty air, thick with the smell of roasting maize and unwashed humanity. Just seconds ago, your biggest problem was existential gourd-based uncertainty. It was a good problem to have, simple and low stakes. Now, the bustling market noise around you seems to fade into a dull, distant hum, as if someone has put a thick clay pot over your head. The woman who was just loudly haggling for a woven blanket is now staring at you, her mouth slightly ajar. The world has ground to a halt, and you're the unfortunate axle it has stopped on. Your brain scrambles for a logical explanation. Perhaps you've won something. A raffle. The annual Best Gourd Ponderer Award. That seems unlikely, even for a civilization that worships a feathered serpent. The two priests just stand there, patient, letting the cosmic horror of their announcement sink in. One of them is tall and unnervingly thin, with obsidian plugs in his earlobes that seem to absorb the very light around them. The other is shorter, stockier, and has a faint, rhythmic twitch in his left eye, as if he's perpetually winking at a secret, terrible joke. They smell of burnt copal incense and a faint, coppery tang you can't quite place but definitely don't like. You try to formulate a response, something clever and persuasive. You want to tell them there's been a mistake, that you're actually terribly inconvenient to sacrifice right now. You have plans. Vague, undefined plans, but plans nonetheless. You open your mouth, but no sound comes out. You look past them, at the faces of your neighbors. They are a mixture of awe, relief, and pure, unadulterated pity. Awe that a god has noticed someone from their little corner of the city, and profound relief that it wasn't them. You can see it in their eyes. You've just been upgraded from that person who lives down the path to holy instrument for divine appeasement. It's the ancient world's equivalent of going viral for all the wrong reasons. You are no longer a person. You are a solution to a theological problem, a piece of metaphysical plumbing to fix a celestial leak. It's a promotion you never wanted, with a retirement plan that is, to put it mildly, accelerated. You try to bargain, not with words, but with your eyes. You look at the head priest, trying to convey a message of, "Are you sure? I'm mostly gristle, very low in divine nutrients. You should see my cousin. He's much more marbled." But his expression is one of serene, unshakable purpose. This isn't a negotiation, it's a notification. It feels less like a holy decree and more like a final notice from the universe's most powerful homeowners association. You've violated Rule 3A. Do not fail to be divinely selected for sacrifice. And the penalty is, well, you. The shorter priest finally makes a move, placing a hand gently on your arm. The touch isn't forceful, but it has the finality of a locked door. It's the kind of grip that says, your voluntary cooperation is much appreciated, but entirely optional. The gourd you were holding slips from your fingers and thuds softly in the dirt. Your old life, with its simple, earthly concerns, lies there with it. Your new job has just begun, and you have a sinking feeling that you won't last long enough to complain to HR. Before you meet your celestial makers, you're given the VIP treatment. You're bathed, oiled, and dressed in clothes that are far nicer than anything you've ever owned. It's like a luxury spa day, if the spa was run by people who fully intended to murder you for a good harvest. You're fed the best foods, given the finest drinks, and treated like a king. It's deeply unsettling. You're ushered away from the marketplace into a quiet, secluded chamber, deep within the temple complex. The chaotic sounds of the city die behind you, replaced by the soft whisper of sandals on stone and the low hum of distant chanting. The air here is cool and heavy with the scent of burning herbs and something floral you can't quite name. Two attendants, silent and efficient, guide you toward a sunken pool filled with steaming water. This, in itself, is a miracle. Your concept of bathing involves a cold, fast-moving stream and a healthy tolerance for shivering. This is different. This is luxury. The water is impossibly warm, scented with petals that float on the surface like tiny, fragrant boats. For a moment, a sliver of your brain forgets the circumstances and thinks, well, this is nice. That thought is promptly scrubbed away. The attendants work on you with a focused, reverent energy, using rough cloths to exfoliate your skin until it tingles. They are methodical, treating your body like a sacred artifact that needs to be polished before being put on display. There's no conversation, just the rhythmic sound of scrubbing and splashing. You feel less like a person, and more like a high-end vegetable being prepped for the world's most important soup. They wash your hair, untangling the knots with a gentle precision that is far more terrifying than any cruelty. Cruelty you could understand. This meticulous, impersonal care is something else entirely. It's the kind of attention to detail one gives to a thing, not a person. You are no longer you. You are an offering, and offerings must be pristine. Once you're clean enough to meet a god, they lead you, dripping, to a low bench. The next phase begins, the oiling. An attendant brings a clay jar filled with a thick, golden oil that smells of maize and spice. They anoint you from head to toe, their hands moving in slow, practiced circles. The oil is soothing, but the sensation is deeply strange. You feel like you're being basted. Every part of you is coated in a divine sheen, making you glisten in the low torchlight. It's a full-body treatment designed to make you look as radiant and holy as possible for your final, public appearance. It's the ancient equivalent of a red carpet glow-up, except the carpet is a pyramid staircase, and the after-party is in the underworld. Then come the clothes. They lay out a tunic of the finest woven cotton, dyed a brilliant, shocking red. It's softer than anything you've ever felt. They place a heavy pectoral on your chest, made of polished jade and shells, cool against your oiled skin. Bracelets are clasped on your wrists, and a feathered headdress is carefully placed on your head. You look down at yourself, a stranger in a divine costume. These aren't clothes, they are vestments. They mark you, separating you from the world of the living. And finally, the feast. You're seated and presented with plates of food you've only ever dreamed of. Tender roasted meat, honeyed cakes, and a frothy fermented drink that numbs your tongue and your fear. You eat because what else is there to do? The food is delicious, which is the cruelest joke of all. Every perfect bite is a reminder of the life you're about to leave. The hospitality is impeccable. The service is flawless. The only downside is the checkout policy, which is, you suspect, rather final. Now it's time for your public appearance. You're walked through the city streets, and everyone comes out to see you. Some people cheer, some weep, and others just stare, with a morbid curiosity, usually reserved for chariot accidents. You try to smile and wave, but it's hard to look regal when you know your final destination is a stone altar with questionable drainage. The priests set a slow, deliberate pace, giving the entire neighborhood ample time to witness your final stroll. The sound is a confusing symphony. There's a high-pitched flute weaving a mournful melody somewhere nearby, punctuated by the deep, rhythmic thud of a drum that seems to beat in time with your own racing heart. But beneath the official music is a wall of human noise, 1,000 conversations dropping to a whisper as you pass, the shuffling of feet, the occasional gasp, and the sharp cry of a baby who is probably the only one reacting with the appropriate amount of panic. The air is thick with the sweet, cloying scent of thrown flowers, which mixes uneasily with the city's usual perfume of wood smoke, cooking beans, and open sewers. It's a sensory cocktail for which you have no name, but if you had to label it, it would be ode to impending doom. You scan the faces in the crowd, and it's a deeply strange experience. They aren't looking at you, the person who just last week was complaining about the price of avocados. They are looking at something else entirely. They see a symbol, a walking, talking prayer for rain and fertile soil. You are a living petition, and your signature will be written in blood. A mother pulls her child close, pointing at you and whispering something that is probably educational and deeply traumatizing. A group of young men who would normally be joking and shoving each other stand in silent, reverent attention. You are the grand marshal of your own funeral procession, the main attraction in a parade where the theme is divine appeasement. It's the worst celebrity experience imaginable. There are no fans, only beneficiaries of your imminent demise. The priests on either side of you don't speak. They simply guide you with a light but firm pressure on your elbows, their faces serene masks of piety. You're hyper-aware of your costume. The heavy jade pectoral on your chest feels like a tombstone, a constant, cool reminder of your fate. The magnificent feathered headdress, which seemed so glorious in the temple, now feels ridiculous, bobbing with every step. You try to walk with a dignity you absolutely do not feel, keeping your back straight and your head high. It feels like a performance, like you've been cast in a play where you didn't get to read the script, and you're just now realizing the final act is a bit of a downer. You are an imposter of holiness, a fraud in fine feathers, and you're terrified everyone can tell. Then you turn a corner, and the wide central plaza opens up before you. And there it is. The Great Pyramid dominates the sky, a man-made mountain of faith and fear. its stone sides seeming to scrape the heavens. The steps ascend into the bright, unforgiving sunlight, like a stairway to a very unpleasant heaven. For the first time, the reality of the situation crashes down on you, not as an abstract idea, but as a physical place. That is where this walk ends. That is where you are going. The flute music seems to get louder, the drum beat faster. All the noise, all the faces, all the smells fade into the background, and all you can see is that towering stone structure. The crowd's roar intensifies as you approach the base, a wave of sound that washes over you. The parade is almost over. A strange part of you is relieved. The public viewing, the awkward waving, the feeling of being an exhibit in a museum of the living. It's done. You've navigated the social horror of being the guest of honor at your own sacrifice. All you have to do now is climb. You glance up at the endless staircase, at the tiny figures of other priests waiting at the top, and think that after all this, it would be deeply and profoundly embarrassing to trip on the first step. You're presented with a magnificent feast, a spread of all the local delicacies. There's stew, roasted meats, and more corn than you've ever seen in your life. You eat, because what else are you going to do? It's the ultimate last meal request, except you didn't get to request it, and the chef keeps looking at you with a tear in his eye. The meal is served in a small, private chamber, away from the prying eyes of the public. The only audience you have now is a handful of silent attendants, and the aforementioned chef, a large man who seems to be on the verge of an emotional breakdown. Before you sits a low table, laden with a spread that seems designed to feed a whole family for a week. There's a steaming bowl of a rich, dark stew that smells of chili and toasted seeds. A whole roasted bird, possibly a turkey, glistens with a honey glaze, its skin perfectly crisp. And then there is the corn. It's everywhere. There are stacks of warm, soft corn cakes, grilled cobs dripping with melted butter and lime, and even a large clay jug filled with a thick, frothy, fermented corn drink that the attendants pour for you with a reverent gravity. You have seen less corn at a harvest festival. Your stomach growls, a traitorous organ with absolutely no sense of occasion. A part of your brain, the ancient, practical part, screams at you to eat. Energy is energy, no matter how short the deadline. So you pick up a corn cake and dip it in the stew. The flavor explodes in your mouth. It's the most delicious thing you've ever tasted. The meat is tender, the sauce is complex, and for a fleeting, insane moment, you forget why you're here. You're just a person enjoying a really, really good meal. Then you catch the chef's eye. He's watching you with an expression of intense pride and profound sorrow. And as you take another bite, a single tear rolls down his cheek and disappears into his beard. This makes the whole experience profoundly awkward. You feel an urge to comfort him, to say, "Don't worry, it's delicious. Really top-notch work." But that seems wildly inappropriate. You're trying to enjoy your last supper, and you're being forced to manage the emotional state of the caterer. It's a 5-star dining experience with the universe's worst cover charge. You take a long sip of the fermented drink. It's sweet, sour, and slightly alcoholic, and it does a decent job of numbing the edges of your existential dread. You keep eating, moving on to the roasted bird, tearing off a piece of meat with your fingers. It's succulent, perfect. The chef lets out a small, choked sob. You begin to suspect this isn't just about hospitality. This isn't a courtesy. It's a critical step in the process. They are filling you with the best of the earth, stuffing you with the very life and sustenance you're being sacrificed to protect. You are being made into a worthy vessel, a container of agricultural perfection. The corn, the meat, the spices, it's all being packed into you, transforming you from a regular person into a bursting piñata of divine offerings. You are not just being fed, you are being consecrated from the inside out. You're being marinated for the gods. The realization doesn't make the food taste any less delicious, but it does add a certain horrifying context to every bite. You finish the meal feeling uncomfortably full, a living, breathing pantry of sacred ingredients, and you can't help but make a mental note to leave the chef a glowing review in the afterlife. The head priest sits down with you for a little chat. He explains the vital role you're about to play in cosmic stability, crop fertility, and preventing the sun from falling out of the sky. He talks to you in a calm, reassuring tone, like an HR manager explaining that your position is being eliminated for the greater good of the company. You nod along, mostly because his obsidian dagger is very distracting. The meeting takes place in a small, windowless room, the air thick with the metallic scent of old blood, cleverly masked by clouds of copal incense. The priest, a man whose face is a roadmap of wrinkles and whose eyes hold the serene emptiness of a clear desert sky, gestures for you to sit. He himself settles onto a carved stone stool opposite you. He lays his hands on the table, and next to them, the dagger. It's a beautiful, terrible thing, chipped from volcanic glass to a razor's edge that seems to drink the torchlight. He doesn't point with it or gesture aggressively. It just sits there, an unsubtle reminder of the meeting's agenda. He leans forward, a warm, professional smile on his lips. "We're so glad you could make it," he begins, as if you had a choice. "I just wanted to touch base and walk you through the next steps of your transition." He launches into a prepared speech, his voice a low, soothing drone. He uses words you don't quite understand, but that sound vaguely important. He talks about realigning celestial assets, optimizing agricultural outputs, and ensuring continuity of solar operations. Your sacrifice, he explains, isn't an end. It's a synergistic transfer of life force for the benefit of all stakeholders. The stakeholders being, of course, everyone who isn't you. He explains that your role in the community is being divinely restructured, and that this new position comes with an unprecedented opportunity for spiritual upward mobility. He makes it sound like you're being headhunted by the gods. He even mentions the onboarding process to the Underworld, which he assures you will be handled by their most experienced team. You try to focus, but your eyes keep drifting back to the dagger. It lies perfectly still on the stone table, gleaming. It's the physical manifestation of the subtext of this entire conversation. While he talks about glorious purpose and eternal honor, the dagger whispers a much simpler, sharper story. You want to ask questions. Are there benefits? Is there a severance package? Can you perhaps recommend someone else for this incredible opportunity? You feel a bubble of hysterical laughter rising in your chest. You've been called into the principal's office of the universe, and you're about to be expelled from the mortal coil. The priest pauses, perhaps sensing your distraction. "Think of it this way," he says, his voice dropping to a confidential, encouraging tone. "Your contribution will be a key performance indicator for this entire cycle. When the rains come, that will be your legacy." He sees you not as a person, but as a resource. You are a budget line item in the grand cosmic spreadsheet. Your fear, your life, your memories, they are all irrelevant externalities in this divine business transaction. He looks at you with the dispassionate gaze of a manager who has had this same conversation 100 times before. He has mastered the art of talking about something horrific as if it were mundane paperwork. You are simply the latest quarterly report to be filed with the sun god. Finally, he stands up, signaling the end of the meeting. The pep talk is over. "We're all very excited about what you're going to achieve for us," he says, placing a hand on your shoulder. It's a gesture that's meant to be encouraging, but feels incredibly heavy. He doesn't offer to shake your hand. Instead, he picks up the obsidian dagger, his fingers wrapping around the hilt with a practiced familiarity. The meeting is adjourned. You've been fully briefed on your termination, and you understand the company's position perfectly. Now, it's time to head to the altar. Let's talk about the venue for your final performance. The altar is usually a massive stone slab at the top of a very tall pyramid. It's cold, hard, and definitely not ergonomically designed. As you lie down, you realize that ancient architects were masters of dramatic presentation, but gave absolutely zero thought to lumbar support. The journey to the top is an ordeal in itself. Each step of the pyramid is impossibly steep, designed for divine processions, not for a casual afternoon climb. Your legs, already heavy with dread, feel like they're made of stone. The sun beats down, heating the dark volcanic rock until it radiates a shimmering heat that makes the air dance. Below you, the city shrinks into a living map, a sprawling collection of rooftops and courtyards. The roar of the crowd becomes a distant, inhuman sound, like the breaking of waves on a faraway shore. There are no handrails. The only thing to hold onto is the rough edge of the step above you, a gesture that feels both desperate and futile. You are ascending into the sky, leaving the world of the living one agonizing step at a time. When you finally reach the summit, breathless and dizzy, you're greeted by the altar. It's not ornate or decorated. It's a masterpiece of brutalist simplicity, a single massive block of basalt, weathered by centuries of sun, rain, and things you'd rather not think about. It's positioned perfectly in the center of the platform, the focal point of the entire city. The surface isn't flat. It has a slight convex curve to it, which you initially assume might be for some strange, symbolic reason. You will soon learn it is for a much more practical purpose, one related to anatomy and gravity. You run a hand over the surface. It's cool to the touch despite the blazing sun, and while it looks smooth from a distance, it's actually pitted and rough, with a texture that feels like it could scrape the skin from your back. You notice the channels. Faint, dark lines are carved into the stone, running from the center to the edges. They look like veins on a giant stone leaf. These aren't for decoration. This is a drainage system. This is the moment you fully appreciate that this entire structure, this magnificent pyramid, this awe-inspiring temple, is ultimately a piece of highly specialized, incredibly durable medical equipment. It is a stage, a workbench, and a drain, all rolled into one architecturally impressive package. It's built to last, built to be seen from a mile away, and built to be easily cleaned. The design is a chilling blend of religious fervor and cold, dispassionate engineering. As the priests guide you onto it, the cold of the stone seeps through your thin tunic, a final, shocking embrace from the earth. The curved surface forces your back into an unnatural arch, pushing your chest and stomach upwards. It's a position of total vulnerability, designed to make the priest's job as easy as possible. It is the absolute opposite of comfort. Every line and angle of the slab is calibrated for maximum efficiency and display. It's like being asked to lie on an operating table, designed by a committee of abstract artists and butchers. There is no pillow for your head, no support for your neck, just the unyielding, unforgiving reality of the rock. You are now perfectly positioned, perfectly presented. The venue is ready. The performance is about to begin. The priest unveils his toolkit. You were hoping for something symbolic, maybe a gentle tap on the head. Instead, you see a collection of obsidian blades, flint knives, and other implements that look like they were designed by someone who really, really hated bodies. These aren't just sharp, they're terrifyingly efficient. The instruments are laid out on a clean white cotton cloth, presented with the reverence a modern chef might reserve for a set of perfect Japanese knives. A junior priest unrolls the bundle, and the dark tools stand out in stark contrast to the fabric. Your eyes are immediately drawn to the centerpiece, a large obsidian blade, its handle wrapped in leather and decorated with small, polished shells. The blade itself is a thing of terrible beauty. It's not metal, it's volcanic glass, chipped with incredible skill into a leaf shape. The sun catches its surface, and it doesn't just shine. It seems to inhale the light, revealing swirling, smoky patterns within the black glass. You've seen sharper-looking objects in your kitchen drawer back home. You are dangerously, fatally wrong about this. Your brain, desperately trying to protect you, whispers that it's just a fancy rock. But the head priest picks it up, and the way he holds it tells a different story. He handles it with an expert's familiarity, his fingers finding their natural place on the hilt. He isn't holding a crude weapon. He's holding a precision instrument. A fact that your 21st century mind is unaware of is that obsidian can be flaked to an edge, just a few molecules thick, far sharper than a modern steel scalpel. This isn't a primitive tool. It is the single sharpest object humanity has ever produced, designed for one purpose: to slice through skin, muscle, and cartilage with terrifyingly little resistance. It's not meant to bludgeon or tear. It's meant to open you up as cleanly and efficiently as a letter. He holds the blade up for a moment, letting the sun glint along its razor-fine edge. It's a ceremonial gesture, but it's also a practical one. He's checking for imperfections. This is quality control. He runs his thumb along the flat of the blade, never the edge, with a look of focused concentration. He is a craftsman checking his favorite tool, a surgeon preparing for a complex procedure. This detached professionalism is somehow more chilling than any frenzied fanaticism could ever be. He is not lost in a religious trance. He is calm, focused, and about to go to work. You glance at the other items on the cloth. There are smaller flint knives, their edges serrated and cruel-looking, probably for less delicate work. There are bone awls, sharpened to fine points. The entire kit speaks of a deep, practical, and horrifying anatomical knowledge. This isn't guesswork. This is a science, a well-rehearsed and perfected procedure passed down through generations of priests. They have figured out the quickest, most effective way to deconstruct a human being for the viewing pleasure of the gods. And as the head priest turns back to you, the obsidian blade now held ready in his hand, you have the sudden, awful realization that you are not about to be killed. You are about to be expertly processed. As you're led to the altar, a great roar goes up from the crowd below. They're chanting your name, or at least a catchy tune about appeasing the rain god. For one brief, shining moment, you are the most popular person in the entire civilization. It's a shame you won't be around for the after-party. The sound isn't just a noise, it's a physical force. It travels up the stone steps of the pyramid and vibrates through the soles of your feet, buzzing in your teeth and bones. It's a solid wall of sound, built from 1,000 individual voices, all chanting the same rhythmic, hypnotic phrase. From your vantage point, the great plaza below is a living carpet of humanity, a swirling mosaic of brightly colored cloaks and dark hair. They are a single entity, a massive, breathing creature of which you are the sole focus. It's the kind of undivided attention that modern celebrities would kill for, though in your case, the phrasing feels a bit too literal. The energy rising from them is electric, a potent mixture of fear, hope, and fervent belief. It's a tidal wave of human emotion, and you are standing at the exact point where it's about to break. You try to comprehend the sound on a technical level. It's layered. At the bottom is the deep, resonant thrum of massive drums, a beat that feels less like music and more like a second giant heartbeat for the entire city. Above that, you can hear the shrill, almost frantic melody of bone flutes cutting through the air like the cries of strange birds. But the main element, the one that drowns out everything else, is the chanting. It's not just shouting, it's a unified melodic roar. It rises and falls with a practiced cadence, a piece of music that has been rehearsed for generations. They are performing this ritual with you, and you are the star instrument. For a moment, a deeply perverse part of your brain enjoys it. You feel like the headliner at the world's most terrifying music festival. Everyone is here to see you. Every eye is on you. You've never been this important, this central to the lives of so many people. The feeling is dizzying, almost intoxicating. Then you remember the context, and the euphoria curdles into pure, cold dread. They are not cheering for you. They are cheering for what you represent. The promise of rain, the hope of a good harvest, the continuation of their world. You are not the hero of this story. You are the fuel. The roar is their way of pushing the button, of starting the engine. It's a transactional sound, an investment of noise and fervor that expects a very specific, very bloody return. As the priest raises the obsidian blade, a new sound joins the symphony, a collective, sharp intake of breath from 1,000 people at once. The plaza falls silent for a single, impossible heartbeat. The world holds its breath with them. Then, as the blade begins its descent, the silence shatters. The roar that comes now is different. It's not a chant, it's a release, a single, deafening, explosive shout of catharsis and terrible, terrible faith. It is the sound of a prayer being answered before it has even been fully sent. It's the loudest, most sincere, and absolute last round of applause you will ever receive. The priests begin a long, droning chant, listing all the cosmic benefits your sacrifice will bring. They mention rainfall, healthy livestock, victory in battle, and, for some reason, a surprisingly detailed inventory of your internal organs. You learn that your liver is apparently crucial for preventing locusts, and your spleen is the key to a bountiful squash harvest. Who knew? The chant starts as a low hum, a vibration that seems to emanate from the priest's very core and resonate through the stone altar into your bones. It's a monotonous, hypnotic sound, a language of pure faith that you don't understand, but whose purpose is chillingly clear. At first, the words paint a broad, predictable picture. He speaks to the sky, bargaining for rain. He addresses the earth, petitioning for fertility. He calls out to the gods of war, requesting that the neighboring city-state suddenly develop a crippling fear of pointy sticks. It's the standard cosmic wish list, the kind of grand, sweeping promises you'd expect from a divine transaction of this magnitude. But then, the focus of the chant narrows, shifting from the celestial to the clinical. The priest's tone doesn't change, but the content takes a sharp turn into the bizarrely specific. He is no longer just offering a human life. He's presenting a detailed catalogue of its component parts, as if reading the ingredients list on the universe's most sacred snack. You learn that your liver, an organ you've given precisely zero thought to your entire life, is actually a potent magical shield against swarms of locusts. Your spleen, which you couldn't have pointed to if your life depended on it, and it now sort of does, is the single most important factor in ensuring a bountiful squash harvest. You lie there, listening to your own biology being repurposed into a divine toolkit. It's the most surreal out-of-body experience imaginable. He continues the inventory. Your kidneys, he drones, are not just for filtering waste. They are twin sacred stones that will purify the city's water supply for an entire year. Your lungs, currently working overtime with shallow, panicked breaths, will provide the sacred wind that blows away pestilence and bad spirits. It feels less like a holy ritual and more like a metaphysical car auction, where every part of your chassis is being sold off for a different divine purpose. You are no longer a person. You are a collection of highly specialized spiritual technologies, a holy machine about to be stripped for parts. The list goes on. Your stomach, still full from your last meal, is praised as a vessel of abundance that will ward off famine. Your intestines are a symbol of longevity. Their length and coils will grant a long and prosperous life to the civilization itself. It's the universe's most invasive performance review, and apparently you're getting stellar marks across the board. The priest isn't addressing you, the terrified human on the slab. He's speaking about you, as if you're a prized piece of equipment whose features he's proudly demonstrating to the unseen gods. He discusses your body with the detached passion of an engineer, explaining a blueprint. The chant finally builds to its crescendo, focusing on the grand prize. He speaks of your heart. It is not merely a muscle that pumps blood. It is the sun within the body, a pulsating seed of pure life, the most potent offering of all. Its final beat will reset a cosmic clock. Its warmth will feed the sun god itself, and its sacrifice will guarantee the dawn for 1,000 more days. The cosmic inventory is complete. Every single part of you has been assigned a glorious, eternal destiny. It's an incredible honor, really. All you have to do to fulfill this grand cosmic potential is lie perfectly still for one more moment. As the moment arrives, your mind is a whirlwind of profound existential questions like, will this be quick? Did I leave the oven on back in my hut? And I wonder if reincarnation is real, and if I'll come back as something with a longer lifespan, like a tortoise or a rock. Your brain, it seems, has a terrible sense of timing. But as the drums pound and the chanting swells, thought becomes a kind of cruel sport. Every sound suddenly feels symbolic. The rustle of feathers from the priest's headdress becomes a countdown. The smell of burning copal seems to cling to the back of your throat. You start bargaining with reality itself. Maybe they'll change their minds. Maybe the gods prefer someone taller. Maybe this is all just ceremonial theater, and nobody actually dies. Unfortunately, the obsidian dagger glinting in the sunlight doesn't look theatrical. Humans have always been bad at facing their own endings. Some scream, some faint, some try to reason with the inevitable. You try humor. You think, absurdly, that maybe if you crack a joke, nice weather for an apocalypse, huh? The priest might laugh and forget what he was about to do. He doesn't. He's been doing this long enough that gallows humor barely registers. Your senses distort. The world around you slows into fragments. The crowd's noise melting into a dull hum. The sky, looking too blue for what's about to happen. The air too calm. You notice tiny, irrelevant details. How clean the stone is. How the priest's hands don't shake. How the fabric under your back feels rougher than you expected. Fear isn't loud anymore. It's precise. Then, a strange detachment sets in. Historians might later call this the moment of acceptance, but it's really just cognitive overload. Your mind protects itself by pretending this isn't happening to you. You imagine you're watching from above, a spectator to your own absurd fate. You wonder if the gods, wherever they are, ever feel guilty, or if they're as indifferent as the sun burning overhead. A part of you starts analyzing. You think about how this ritual must look from a distance. The geometry of the pyramid, the symmetry of the crowd, the rhythm of the chant. It's almost beautiful in a horrifying way. Organized death disguised as divine order. You start to realize why people believed in it. Chaos terrifies civilizations, and a sacrifice offers the illusion of control. The priest's knife isn't just a weapon, it's a tool for keeping meaning alive. Then, another thought. What if it doesn't work? What if your death changes nothing? If the rains don't come, will they dig up your bones and apologize, or just blame you for not being pure enough? You nearly laugh again, but your throat won't cooperate. Your final seconds are neither heroic nor transcendent. There's no heavenly chorus, no sudden understanding of the cosmos, just an overwhelming awareness that you were part of a system too vast and irrational to question until it was too late. The world, it turns out, doesn't pause for revelation. It keeps moving, chanting, believing. And as the priest raises his hand, you find yourself focusing on the smallest thing. A bird flying past, its wings catching the light. It doesn't know your name, your fear, or your importance. It just keeps flying. That, you think, is the real secret of the universe. The world goes on, indifferent, efficient, and absurdly beautiful. In some cultures, the heart was the star of the show. The priest, with a skill that would make a modern surgeon jealous, would make a swift incision and... well, you get the picture. Your still-beating heart is held aloft for the sun god to see, a final, gruesome testament to your unwilling devotion. For the ancient world, this wasn't barbarism. It was logistics. The heart wasn't just an organ. It was the cosmic battery of existence. Every pulse, every contraction, was thought to echo the rhythm of the universe itself. The sun needed blood the way you need coffee. It kept things running. If the god didn't get his daily fix, the sky might forget to rise, the crops might sulk, and the empire might collapse under divine neglect. So the priest's blade wasn't an act of cruelty. It was maintenance. Necessary, efficient, horrifying. The Aztecs perfected this idea with terrifying organization. The great temple of Tenochtitlan was essentially a dual altar system, one side for the rain god Tlaloc, the other for the war god Huitzilopochtli. On festival days, the pyramid turned into a conveyor belt of devotion. Victims ascended the stairs, one after another, hearts extracted with factory precision. Chroniclers said the steps ran slick with blood, though it's hard to know where fact ends and propaganda begins. Spanish conquistadors, after all, loved to exaggerate the horrors of their enemies while quietly inventing new ones of their own. Still, archaeological evidence leaves little doubt. Human sacrifice wasn't metaphor. It was manual labor for the cosmos. To the priest, that heart wasn't a symbol. It was a fuel source. He'd raise it high so the sun could see, and sometimes even smear it across an idol's mouth, feeding the divine machinery. If that sounds absurd, remember that every civilization has its rituals for keeping the universe running. Ours just involve spreadsheets, taxes, and quarterly reports instead of obsidian knives. The most unnerving part isn't the gore, it's the calm. Accounts describe the precision, the choreography, the eerie normality of it all. The music played, the crowd cheered. The priest's movements were almost ceremonial dance, practiced so often he could do it blindfolded. No frenzy, no hesitation, just the serene efficiency of belief weaponized. And then there's the question of the heart itself. How it looked, how long it beat. Some sources claim it pulsed for a few seconds after being removed, an image that fascinated both priests and anthropologists alike. Was it divine proof, or just the last spasm of muscle memory? The line between miracle and biology has always been thin when humans are desperate for meaning. It's worth remembering that to the participants, this wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake. To be chosen was, in theory, an honor. The victim was believed to become one with the god they died for, joining the sun's journey across the sky, or helping bring the rains. It's a grim sort of promotion, but in a world ruled by unpredictable nature, immortality, even the bloody kind, was better than anonymity. There's also the disturbing symmetry of it all. In every era, people have been willing to sacrifice others, or themselves, for the illusion of order. Whether on a stone altar or a battlefield, whether to gods, nations, or ideologies, the logic stays the same. Spill enough blood, and maybe the chaos will stop. The method changes, the reasoning doesn't. When the priest finally lowers the heart and places it in a ceremonial bowl, the ritual concludes with chants and smoke, the air thick with both triumph and decay. The body is rolled down the temple steps, returning symbolically to the earth it once fed. The crowd cheers, reassured that tomorrow will come, that the sun will rise, that their world remains intact. It's a hauntingly human gesture, this idea that death can buy stability, that somewhere between fear and faith, we can negotiate with the universe. The heart, still warm a moment ago, becomes the receipt for a transaction no one ever truly understands. And as the priest wipes his hands and prepares for the next offering, you realize something unsettling. The gods, if they exist, have the easiest job in history. They never have to lift a finger. Humans do all the work. If you're lucky enough to be in a civilization with cenotes, your end might be a bit more aquatic. You're led to the edge of a massive, deep sinkhole filled with dark water. They say it's a direct portal to the underworld. They give you a little push, and you get to find out for yourself. At least you don't have to climb all those stairs. To the Maya, cenotes weren't just geological accidents. They were sacred mouths in the earth, literal openings to Xibalba, the realm of the dead. The gods of rain and fertility, like Chak, were thought to dwell in these watery depths, receiving both gifts and messages in the most literal way possible. Jewelry, pottery, jade, obsidian, even entire human bodies were hurled into the abyss in hopes of cosmic favor. It wasn't destruction, it was delivery. The cenote was the universe's post office, and you were the express package. Archaeologists who have explored these submerged vaults describe them as time capsules of devotion and dread. The sacred cenote at Chichen Itza, for example, has yielded hundreds of skeletons, men, women, and children, all thrown into the deep as living or lifeless offerings. Alongside them, golden ornaments, carved idols, obsidian knives, and textile fragments miraculously preserved in the oxygen-starved dark. Each object tells the same story: desperation disguised as piety. Imagine the ceremony. You're paraded to the edge, torches flickering against the limestone walls, drums echoing through the humid night. The priests chant, their words bouncing off the cavern like thunder. The water below looks bottomless, black, and strangely calm. It's said to lead straight to the gods, but right now it feels like the opposite. A descent into everything you've ever feared. Some victims were thrown in alive, expected to drown in divine company. Others were tossed in after death, their bodies becoming couriers for the prayers of the living. Sometimes, after the ritual, divers were sent down to retrieve the offerings. Survivors, if there were any, were considered sacred, touched by the gods. Their testimony proof that Xibalba had accepted the gift and returned the messenger. It's faith by trial, and the trial is waterlogged. The Cenote sacrifices weren't random violence. They were cosmic negotiation. Rain meant life, drought meant ruin. When crops failed and skies refused to open, the people believed that the gods were thirsty, and nothing quenched divine thirst quite like human essence. The plunge wasn't punishment, it was service. Terrifying, sacred, bureaucratic service. Standing at the rim, you'd hear the priest's voice declare that the gods would remember your name. You'd feel the wind rise from the pit like a living thing, cold and damp, smelling of minerals and eternity. Then a shove, a blur of motion, and gravity takes over. The sound of the world above fades, replaced by the rush of air and the sudden slap of water. For a few suspended moments, you're weightless between worlds, neither alive nor dead, neither land nor underworld. The descent continues in silence. The cold closes in. If you open your eyes, you see only fragments of light above, shimmering like the last lies of the living. You think of the stories, how Chak waits below, how the gods will judge your worth, how this act might bring the rain. The logic almost comforts you. If there has to be an end, at least it's for something. Centuries later, divers will find you again. Not you exactly, but what's left of people like you. Bones tangled with offerings, the remnants of ancient prayers turned to silt. They'll lift a skull, a bracelet, a jade bead, and call it evidence. But to the ones who stood at that edge, trembling in torchlight, it wasn't evidence. It was faith carved into water. The Cenote is unique among sacred sites because it swallows everything: fear, devotion, and time itself. Temples crumble, altars erode, but the Cenotes remain, still drinking the rain, still echoing the chants of those who fed them. They're the oldest witnesses, patient and bottomless. And somewhere in that darkness, maybe the gods of the deep still stir, surrounded by centuries of gifts and ghosts. They don't speak, they don't demand, they just wait for the next drop of rain, the next offering, or the next archaeologist foolish enough to think the underworld ever closed for business. Just when you thought things couldn't get any darker, you learn about the children. Chosen for their purity, they were often left on freezing mountain tops as offerings. It was believed their tears would call the rain. It's a practice so grim it makes you grateful for your own, relatively swift, adult-sized sacrifice. In the hierarchy of horror, this was the summit, literally. The Inca believed that the higher you went, the closer you were to the gods. So the chosen children, known as Capacocha victims, were marched thousands of meters up the Andes to be sacrificed among snow and silence. These weren't condemned criminals or war captives. They were perfect specimens, healthy, beautiful, unblemished. The empire's most treasured children became its most precious currency. The process began months in advance. Priests selected the children and treated them like royalty. They were dressed in fine textiles, fed the richest foods, adorned with gold and feathers. Songs were sung in their honor. To the community, it was a privilege, not a punishment. Parents wept with pride, not terror, or at least that's what they told themselves. To refuse was unthinkable. You couldn't say no to a god. The final journey was long and merciless. The air thinned, the temperature dropped, and even the llamas struggled for breath. Archaeological findings show they were often given maize beer and coca leaves before the end, perhaps to dull the pain. or perhaps as part of the ritual itself. Their last memories would have been of wind, cold, and the endless horizon of clouds below. At the peak, the ceremony unfolded with quiet precision. The priests prayed, burned offerings, and placed the children in small stone chambers dug into the mountain. Some were buried alive, others died from exposure, their bodies preserved by the freezing air. When archaeologists found them centuries later, they looked almost asleep, cheeks full, hair intact, eyes closed. The most famous, the Lulailako maiden, still rests as if she might wake at any moment. She's over 500 years old and better preserved than most modern mummies kept in climate control. To the Inca, these acts weren't cruelty. They were diplomacy with the cosmos. The mountains were living beings, apes, and the children were messages of loyalty sent directly into their icy hearts. Sacrifice maintained balance between empire and nature, between drought and flood, between life and the indifferent gods above. But the psychological reality is harder to romanticize. Every smiling ceremony masked a collective dread that without blood, the world would unravel. Other cultures followed similar logic. The Carthaginians burned infants to honor Baal Hammon, seeking victory and reign. In ancient Canaan, child offerings were said to ensure divine favor, their cries thought to soften the god's wrath. Even the Bible preserves echoes of this horror, warning against what was once an accepted religious act. Across civilizations, the pattern repeats. Purity plus suffering equals salvation. The equation is ancient, and it never quite disappears. It just changes form. It's tempting to dismiss these rituals as primitive insanity, but the reasoning behind them isn't so alien. They were rooted in fear. The fear of scarcity, of divine silence, of losing control. People believed that by offering what was most precious, they could rewrite fate. And the cruel irony is that in a sense it worked. Empires endured, harvests returned, rains fell. Correlation became confirmation. The cycle fed on its own success. The most chilling part is how calm it all was. No mobs, no chaos. Just solemn ceremony. The priests, efficient as ever. The parents, silent. The children, unaware or resigned. It was collective faith turned into machinery. Belief so absolute, it devoured its own innocence. When you stand before one of those preserved bodies today, every feature intact, it's impossible not to feel the contradiction. Beauty and horror fused into stillness. The empire wanted proof of devotion, and the mountains gave it. Bodies, perfectly preserved, frozen mid-offering. The gods got their message. And what remains now in museum glass isn't just archaeology. It's evidence of how far humans will go to make the universe care about them. The prayers are gone, the priests are dust, but the children endure, silent, eternal, and impossibly small in the cold logic of faith. In Northern Europe, they had a different approach. They'd often strangle you, slit your throat, and then toss you into a peat bog. The strange chemistry of the bog would then preserve your body for thousands of years, turning your skin to leather and your hair to a reddish brown. You become an unwilling historical artifact, a perfectly preserved uh-oh moment for future archaeologists to find. The bog doesn't just keep your body, it keeps your story, or at least enough of it to disturb the people who dig you up centuries later. Found in Ireland, Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands, these human time capsules lie curled in the dark, their last moments captured like a grotesque photograph. Some still have fingernails, eyelashes, even the expression they wore when they died. It's not preservation out of love. It's chemistry. The acidic, oxygen-starved peat halts decay, tanning your flesh like an unwanted piece of leatherwork. Archaeologists first stumbled upon these accidental immortals in the 18th and 19th centuries, when farmers cutting peat hit something softer than usual: skin. Imagine the confusion. You're harvesting fuel for winter, and suddenly a face appears, perfectly intact, looking back at you. No bones, no dust, just a corpse that hasn't realized time has passed. Take Tolland Man, discovered in Denmark in 1950. He's so well preserved that for a moment, everyone thought he was a recent murder victim. The wrinkles on his face, the stubble on his chin, the gentle curve of his closed lips, everything intact. Except he died over 2,000 years ago. Around his neck still hangs the rope that killed him, knotted carefully, deliberately. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a ritual. Most bog bodies tell the same eerie story: death by precision. Strangulation, throat-slitting, skull fractures, all in combination. Archaeologists call it the triple death, a sacrificial insurance policy. If one method didn't please the gods, two more might. Many were deposited at tribal borders or near wetlands associated with fertility deities, suggesting these deaths were offerings to nature itself, an attempt to balance human order with the unpredictable moods of the earth. The irony is that the bogs, meant to consume and erase, became vaults of memory. Every body tells a slightly different tale. Grauballer Man, found in 1952, still had traces of barley porridge in his stomach, the last meal of a condemned man. Lindo Man, pulled from an English bog in the 1980s, bore a broken skull, a garrote mark, and a slit throat, executed with such ritual symmetry that scholars suspect he was a high-status sacrifice, not a criminal. Each of them went in as an offering and came out as an accidental fossil of faith. What's striking is the expression. Many faces appear serene, almost sleeping. It's impossible to know whether that's due to ritual sedation, post-mortem distortion, or something more unsettling. A cultural acceptance so total that even death for the gods brought peace. Their eyes are closed, their hands folded, as if they expected to wake somewhere else. In a way, they did. They woke in our museums. The cold glass and white light of exhibition cases have replaced the soft darkness of the bog. Visitors stare, whisper, and wonder if these people were volunteers, victims, or both. The truth is lost between myth and mud. Science can reconstruct how they died, but never why the living thought it necessary. Yet the bogs themselves still speak. Every excavation reveals pollen grains, woven cords, wooden idols, fragments of a world where earth and deity were one and the same. These sacrifices weren't about cruelty. They were about control. You couldn't reason with the harvest or the weather, but you could offer something precious to keep them stable. In that logic, the bog was an altar, and the peat its eternal priest. Thousands of years later, the offerings endure, quiet, brown, and ageless. They remind us that humans once worshipped the ground itself, and in doing so, found a way to outlive their own mortality. The bog did what no religion could. It kept its promises. After the main event, what happens to the leftovers? In some places, your skull would get cleaned up and put on display on a massive rack called a tsompantli. It's part victory trophy, part religious decoration, and 100% the most terrifying piece of public art you can imagine. A tsompantli wasn't some hidden temple chamber or secret cult display. It was public, monumental, and proudly visible from afar. Built from horizontal wooden poles supported by vertical posts, it held hundreds, sometimes thousands, of skulls threaded neatly through the temples. Imagine a fence made of human faces, all staring blankly at eternity. The Aztecs, masters of spectacle, built some of the largest. The great temple precinct in Tenochtitlan had one estimated to contain over 60,000 skulls. It wasn't decoration, it was communication. Each skull told a story of war, of sacrifice, of divine order. To the Aztecs, this was not grotesque excess. It was proof of balance, of cosmic bookkeeping. Every life taken fed the gods that sustained creation. The rack was both archive and altar, a visible reminder that existence itself was transactional. To live under the sun, someone had to die beneath it. Visitors to Tenochtitlan, like the Spanish chroniclers, were horrified. Bernal Diaz del Castillo described skull racks stretching longer than cathedrals, the air thick with the metallic scent of death. He called it barbaric, of course, but he also couldn't look away. The conquistadors destroyed the racks after their conquest, yet their writings read less like moral outrage and more like grim fascination. The truth is, Europeans had their own skull displays, just less organized. The engineering was disturbingly meticulous. Skulls were cleaned, drilled, and threaded onto long wooden stakes. Some were painted or adorned with feathers, others left bare. Over time they'd bleach in the sun, teeth falling out, bones cracking, until they formed an almost sculptural mass of anonymity. The Aztecs didn't see individuals anymore. They saw patterns, symmetry, order pulled from chaos. Even in death, there was architecture. Recent excavations in Mexico City have confirmed the scale. Archaeologists unearthed the Huitzompantli, a structure of over 600 skulls forming part of a circular tower at the base of the Great Temple. Many belonged to young men, warriors taken in battle, but others, unsettlingly, were women and children. The tower wasn't hidden from view. It stood in the ceremonial heart of the city, confronting everyone with the reality of sacrifice. It was theology in bone. The psychological impact must have been enormous. Every festival, every procession, every market day unfolded beneath those empty eyes. You couldn't forget what kept the universe running. It was staring at you. In a world ruled by divine exchange, the skull rack was the city's pulse, beating silently in bone-white rhythm. Other cultures mirrored this impulse in quieter ways. The Celts collected enemy heads as trophies. The ancient Chinese buried skulls beneath foundations for luck. The difference is scale. The Aztecs turned the idea into infrastructure, a literal monument to the fragility of life and the permanence of death. What makes it haunting isn't the gore, it's the intention. These racks weren't built in rage. They were built in reverence. The priests who arranged them were not executioners, but caretakers of cosmic equilibrium. The skulls were not victims, but ingredients in the eternal recipe of creation. It's religion meeting logistics, devotion meeting display design. If you walked past one today, your instinct would be to recoil. But if you lived there, under those gods, you might have felt something else. Awe. The skulls proved the system worked. The sun still rose, the rain still came, and the city still thrived. Every bleached grin was reassurance that the gods were fed and the world was safe, for now. Thousands of years later, the bones are gone, the wood has rotted, and the city above them hums with modern noise. Yet beneath Mexico City's streets, fragments of the Tzompantli remain, a quiet reminder that faith once required visible evidence. The Aztecs didn't just believe in divine power. They built it, row by row, out of the faces of the fallen. In some ritual contexts, your sacrifice didn't end at the altar. Parts of your body might be ritually consumed by priests or nobles. It wasn't about hunger. It was about absorbing your divine energy or honoring the gods. You've just become the main course in the universe's most morbid farm-to-table dining experience. Across ancient civilizations, Ritual cannibalism sat at the uneasy intersection between faith, biology, and politics. It wasn't random savagery. It was theology with a knife and fork. To consume flesh was to participate directly in the sacred. The act transformed food into communion, merging the divine and the mortal in the most literal way imaginable. It's the kind of logic only total belief could sustain. Eat your god, become your god. The Aztecs refined this concept with characteristic intensity. During the Feast of Flaying, Tlacaxipehualistli, victims were skinned alive in honor of Totec, the god of renewal. Their flesh was cooked and distributed among select participants, sometimes mixed with maize in ceremonial stews. The eater wasn't satisfying appetite. He was absorbing sanctity. Each bite symbolized the rebirth of life through death, a biological metaphor performed in flesh. It's horrifying, yes, but also disturbingly systematic, almost bureaucratic in its devotion. Spanish chroniclers recoiled in moral panic, describing the feasts with disgust. Yet their own faith was built on a symbolic parallel. The Eucharist, where bread and wine represent the body and blood of Christ. The difference is literalness. The Aztecs didn't symbolize, they enacted. In their worldview, metaphors didn't feed gods, meat did. Other cultures mirrored this impulse. In ancient Papua and Melanesia, certain tribes practiced endocannibalism, eating the flesh of deceased relatives not to dishonor them, but to keep them close. It was an act of remembrance, of continuation. The dead must live within us. One anthropologist quoted a ritual leader as saying, "Death wasn't separation, it was digestion." You didn't bury your loved one, you carried them. In the Andes, traces of ritual cannibalism appear in evidence from pre-Inca societies, where human remains were cooked, defleshed, or ingested in ceremonies invoking fertility or renewal. Even in medieval Europe, powdered human bone was prescribed as medicine, called mumia, believed to cure everything from epilepsy to melancholy. The divine dinner never truly ended, it just changed seasonings. The common thread is absorption, a need to consume holiness, vitality, or memory. It's the logic of desperate intimacy. You can pray to a god, or you can eat part of what the god once touched. To those ancient minds, that difference mattered. Matter itself was sacred. Consuming it was the ultimate devotion. Imagine the scene. After the sacrifice, priests distribute portions in solemn ritual. No cheering, no frenzy, just quiet reverence. The heart, considered the seat of courage, might go to a warrior. The limbs, to nobles or priests. The blood could be smeared on idols or mixed into sacred beverages. Everyone participated, not in gluttony, but in collective renewal. You are not a meal, you are a medium. Anthropologists still argue whether the scale of these rituals was exaggerated by Spanish propaganda. Some believe the cannibalistic feasts were rare and symbolic, others that they were systemic and central to Aztec cosmology. The truth probably lies between. A practice that was both real and ritualized, exaggerated and indispensable. What's undeniable is the principle beneath it, the desire to bridge the gap between mortal and divine through the most primal act imaginable. It's the logic of communion without metaphor. To kill is to offer, to eat is to unite, and to digest is to complete the cycle. And while modern sensibilities recoil at the thought, the metaphor lingers everywhere. Every ritual that claims to take in the spirit of another echoes the same ancient hunger. Humanity's oldest theological instinct wasn't to pray, it was to consume. So, as the final ceremony fades and the firelight dances on the altar stones, your body becomes a theology lesson in muscle and marrow. The gods are fed, the people are renewed, and your remains, once flesh, now myth, complete the feast. In a civilization built on the principle that life feeds life, nothing ever truly disappears. It's just served again, in another form, on another sacred plate. When a powerful king or emperor died, he couldn't be expected to go into the afterlife alone. That would be lonely. So his loyal retainers, servants, and wives were all sacrificed to accompany him. It's the worst team-building exercise in history, with a mandatory permanent off-site location. In the ancient world, leadership didn't end at the grave. Rulers were divine extensions of cosmic order, and their deaths threatened to disrupt that balance. The solution was simple, if horrific: recreate their court in the next world. Every servant, guard, and concubine who attended him in life would do so again in eternity, whether they volunteered or not. Loyalty wasn't symbolic, it was terminal. The Sumerians may have pioneered it. Excavations at the royal cemetery of Ur, around 2500 BCE, revealed burial pits containing dozens of attendants laid neatly beside their king or queen. They weren't thrown in. They were arranged, jeweled, and clothed in finery. Musicians still clutch their instruments. Soldiers still wear helmets. Chemical tests suggest they drank a narcotic or poison before being sealed in the tomb, falling asleep beside their ruler forever. The tomb wasn't chaos, it was choreography. Thousands of years later, China perfected the concept on an industrial scale. When the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, died in 210 BCE, he was buried in a necropolis so vast it defies comprehension. The famous terracotta army, 8,000 life-size soldiers, wasn't sculpted for art. It replaced something real. Earlier dynasties buried actual people, soldiers, servants, even horses, all killed to serve their master in the next world. The terracotta soldiers mark an evolution, not a rejection, of the tradition. Clay spared flesh, but the logic remained unchanged. Eternity requires staff. Across Africa, ancient Nubian kings practiced similar rites. In the royal cemeteries of Kush, archaeologists found queens and courtiers buried in surrounding chambers, their bodies positioned reverently, their deaths timed precisely with the ruler's funeral. Egypt flirted with the idea too. Early dynasties show traces of servant burials, before priests replaced human attendants with symbolic figurines known as ushabti. The figurine was meant to work for the deceased in the afterlife, a small clay upgrade over human resources. The Maya and other Mesoamerican civilizations also engaged in retainer sacrifice. At sites like Palenque and Calakmul, rulers' tombs were accompanied by the remains of guards and attendants, often beheaded or poisoned before burial. The message was consistent across continents. Hierarchy survived death. Even in the underworld, someone had to carry your sandals. What's most striking is the tone. None of these deaths appear hurried or panicked. The attendants were prepared, dressed in ceremonial garments, positioned with care. In many cases, there are no signs of struggle. Either they accepted their fate, or the societies around them had made refusal inconceivable. For the ancient mind, dying with one's ruler wasn't tragedy. It was promotion. To modern eyes, it reads as madness, but to them it was metaphysical logistics. If the afterlife mirrored life, then a king without his retinue would be incomplete, a sun without its orbit. Sacrificing others ensured continuity, the eternal functioning of divine order. What we see as cruelty, they saw as consistency. Retainer sacrifice gradually disappeared as civilizations shifted toward symbolic substitution. Clay figurines, carved idols, or carved soldiers replaced human flesh. The ritual survived in miniature, tamed but never fully erased. You can still see its echo in the pyramids, in the mausoleums, in every empire's obsession with being accompanied by power into death. It reveals something uncomfortable. The ancient world's faith in hierarchy was so absolute it transcended mortality. Power didn't end, it simply relocated. The king's body rotted, but his authority lived on, surrounded by the same obedient faces he ruled in life. And so, as the tomb door sealed and the air grew thin, the living and the dead merged into one unbroken order. Silence replaced ceremony. Eternity began with perfect obedience. The ruler slept at the center, and all around him, layered in gold, loyalty, and delusion, his human furniture awaited instructions that would never come. Your insides weren't just for the gods. They were also a GPS for the future. Priests would examine the shape and condition of your organs to predict the future, a practice known as haruspicy. A healthy-looking liver might mean victory, while a discolored lung could signal famine. Your body has become a fleshy, unreliable weather balloon. It began in Mesopotamia, where uncertainty was a national obsession. Every storm, every eclipse, every weird noise in the temple could mean the gods were trying to say something, and someone had to interpret the message. The Baru, the diviner, was part priest, part detective, and part butcher. When omens were unclear, they'd resort to the most literal form of communication imaginable: open up a sheep and read its insides like a divine email. Eventually, the method expanded to include humans. Nothing says commitment to the craft, quite like slicing open a person to check tomorrow's political forecast. The liver was the organ of choice, the supposed seat of life and emotion. Each fold, vein, and spot on it had meaning. A lobe could stand for the king, a fissure for the enemy, a mark for divine favor. The priest would consult clay models of livers covered in inscriptions, cross-referencing what he saw inside the body with centuries of accumulated data. It was statistical divination by way of dissection. The Babylonians, in a sense, invented anatomical databases. The Romans adopted haruspicy with enthusiasm. Before every war, coronation, or major decision, they'd sacrifice an animal, usually a bull or sheep, and let the haruspex interpret the signs. The famous phrase extra inspectio literally meant inspection of the innards. If the liver looked plump and symmetrical, the omens were good. If it was shriveled or spotted, the gods were clearly displeased, and someone, preferably not the emperor, had messed up. Cicero himself complained about how much political policy depended on liver texture, but nobody wanted to risk ignoring the gods' feedback form. Sometimes the interpretations got creative. If an organ appeared incomplete, it was said the gods were withholding their favor. If an extra lobe appeared, it meant something big was coming: war, plague, or divine intervention. It's astrology with a scalpel, where the stars are replaced by intestines and the horoscope requires a mop. The Etruscans, predecessors to the Romans, took it even further. They mapped the sky onto the liver itself, dividing it into sectors representing deities. Each organ became a miniature universe, a cosmos in meat form. The haruspex wasn't just examining tissue. He was communing with the architecture of existence. Your body wasn't personal. It was political, theological, and cosmological data, all stored inconveniently in your abdomen. Even outside the Mediterranean, similar practices appeared. In China, diviners examined animal entrails alongside oracle bones. In ancient Mongolia, shamans read sheep scapulas burned with hot sticks. The principle was universal. The gods speak through pattern, and where there's pattern, there's meaning, especially if you're willing to cut something open to find it. Of course, the results were about as reliable as guessing tomorrow's weather by looking at a sandwich. But that didn't matter. The act itself, the ceremony, the sacrifice, the interpretation, was what restored order. It told the people their leaders were listening to the divine, even if the divine was mumbling incoherently through a kidney. Imagine the scene: a temple courtyard, smoke thick in the air, priests standing over a warm carcass. The haruspeks kneels, hands slick, eyes scanning for signs. The crowd waits, silent. Then, a pronouncement. The gods favor victory. Cheers erupt. Nobody notices the priest casually wiping blood from his face, already planning the next reading in case the weather disagrees. And when humans replaced animals in sacrifice, the logic barely shifted. A body was a message waiting to be opened. Every incision was an inquiry, every organ a divine paragraph. To us, it's madness. To them, it was diagnostics, an autopsy on the present to predict the future. It's strange how much of that logic still survives. We no longer read livers, but we still read data with the same religious confidence, hoping to extract certainty from chaos. The tools have changed. No daggers, just algorithms. But the faith remains identical, that if we cut deep enough into the world, the future will reveal itself. And somewhere, an ancient haruspeks would probably nod in approval, proud that humanity never stopped mistaking patterns for prophecies, just the medium for the message. What happens when the priest is having an off day? Maybe the knife isn't sharp enough, or he slips on a bit of, well, you know. A botched sacrifice was considered a terrible omen, a sign the gods were displeased. It's the only situation where being bad at your job could potentially cause a drought. In the ancient world, precision meant everything. Sacrifices weren't chaotic bloodbaths, they were choreography. Every chant, gesture, and incision followed strict procedure. The rhythm mattered because ritual was communication, and miscommunication with the gods could end civilizations. So when a priest fumbled the ceremony, when the heart didn't come out cleanly, when the animal escaped, when the blood spurted the wrong way, it wasn't just a mistake. It was cosmic static. The Romans kept detailed records of such disasters. If the haruspeks dropped the knife, if the animal twitched before death, if the organs looked unusual, the sacrifice was declared vitiosus, invalid. The ritual had to be repeated from the beginning, sometimes with double the offerings to make up for the insult. It's one thing to ruin dinner. It's another to accidentally offend Jupiter. Even the most seasoned priests must have had cold sweats at the thought of slipping mid-offering while an emperor watched. In Mesoamerica, mistakes were even more dangerous. The Aztecs viewed ritual as a sacred transaction. The priest was the cashier. The gods were the customers. If the payment wasn't clean, the gods might reject it, and by extension, reject the entire civilization. Chronicles describe priests trembling before sacrifices, knowing that hesitation could be read as weakness. A dull obsidian blade or a misplaced cut wasn't just embarrassing. It could spell famine. Some accounts suggest that if a priest botched a heart extraction, he'd be executed on the spot to restore divine order. Efficiency by example. Even animals could ruin everything. Among the Greeks, if a sacrificial bull refused to move forward or bellowed in distress, the ritual was aborted. A cow's bad mood could derail a festival. During the annual hecatomb in Athens, where 100 oxen were sacrificed, one rebellious animal could trigger days of purification rites. The gods, it seemed, were picky eaters. The Inca shared similar fears. High-altitude sacrifices demanded perfection. The chosen children had to remain calm, their bodies undisturbed, the sequence precise. If weather, illness, or human error disrupted the rite, priests read it as a celestial rebuke. The mountain spirits, they believed, had turned their faces away. The penalty wasn't always death for the officiant, but shame, exile, or ritual purification were common. Cosmic failure demanded human accountability. Across cultures, the same anxiety echoes. The divine world must not be mishandled. The priest was surgeon, diplomat, and stage performer all at once, balancing precision and theater under the watchful eyes of both the public and the pantheon. Every movement, every breath, was scrutiny. One slip, and the priest wasn't just incompetent, he was a liability to the cosmos. Imagine the tension of that moment. The crowd waiting, the drums pounding, the smell of incense and iron. The priest lifts the blade, sweat mixing with the blood already on his hands. One wrong cut, one misstep, and the omen flips from blessing to catastrophe. The gods, invisible but ever demanding, are said to turn away. The silence that follows isn't just awkward, it's existential. When such omens occurred, civilizations scrambled to repair the damage. The Romans re-sacrificed. The Aztecs doubled their offerings. The Greeks performed purification rites. The goal wasn't just to appease. It was to reset, to convince the universe that the glitch never happened. Ritual was less about faith than about quality control. Botched sacrifices reveal the truth behind all these traditions. People weren't only worshipping gods, they were managing them. Religion was a system of cosmic maintenance, one that had no tolerance for error. When it broke down, fear filled the vacuum. The rains didn't come, the crops failed, enemies advanced, cause and effect blurred, but the narrative stayed the same. Someone must have done the ritual wrong. And that's the quiet tragedy of it. The priest's trembling hand, the dull knife, the panicked eyes of the crowd, all become symbols of humanity's impossible task, to make sense of the uncontrollable. When the sacrifice failed, it wasn't just a bad omen. It was a reminder that even in our most sacred attempts to control the universe remains beautifully, terrifyingly indifferent. The sun rises the next day. The crops continue to grow, or not. The civilization carries on. Was it because of you? The priests certainly think so. The people hope so. You're not around to offer an opinion, but you've left a permanent bloody mark on history. A testament to the strange and brutal lengths people will go to in order to make sense of a chaotic world. For those left behind, the ritual's end was rarely the end of anything. Once the body cooled, once the smoke dispersed, life demanded interpretation. Priests gathered the omens, read the clouds, watched for signs, birds, thunder, silence, and declared whether the gods had accepted the offering. No one ever said no. To admit failure was to admit futility. So, of course, the sacrifice had worked. The world was safe, order restored, balance maintained. At least until the next drought, the next eclipse, the next whisper of divine displeasure. Civilizations needed belief the way lungs need air. Sacrifice was less about death than reassurance. It proved that humans could still bargain with the infinite, that the universe wasn't deaf, just demanding. The priest's declaration was the closing line of a performance staged for both gods and mortals, a ceremony where the script had to end in success. Otherwise, everything collapsed. The aftermath was ritual, too. In the Aztec Empire, the altar was scrubbed clean, the blood collected or buried in special vessels. Priests fasted to purify themselves after channeling divinity. The spectators went home in silence, half terrified, half relieved, convinced they'd just witnessed something sacred. For a few days, the city pulsed with cosmic confidence. The sun had been fed, the contract renewed. Among the Maya, evidence suggests festivals followed the sacrifices, Music, dancing, feasting. The logic was simple. Life must celebrate what death secures. Every beating drum was a heartbeat stolen back from the gods. Across continents, the same emotional cycle repeated: fear, awe, relief, gratitude. Humans needed closure, even if closure came wrapped in horror. But time, indifferent as ever, kept moving. Weeks passed. The rain returned or didn't. When it didn't, new explanations appeared. Perhaps the victim was impure. Perhaps the ritual was performed incorrectly. Perhaps the gods wanted more. Failure never disproved the system. It only expanded it. The world was too fragile, too unpredictable, to imagine it ran on chance. Archaeology tells this story in layers of repetition. Sites in Mesoamerica, Mesopotamia, and Europe reveal altars rebuilt over the same foundations again and again, blood seeping into the same stones across centuries. It wasn't laziness, it was continuity. Each sacrifice reaffirmed that humanity still remembered its place, below the gods, but not powerless. The dead became part of infrastructure, literal foundations of faith. Even the aftermath of sacrifice became myth. A sudden rainfall or unexpected harvest was proof of divine satisfaction. Survivors told the story, embellishing it until it hardened into legend. The chosen victim's name faded, replaced by symbolism. The individual disappeared, the pattern endured. In that way, every sacrifice succeeded, not necessarily in changing the weather, but in preserving belief itself. The psychological residue was enormous. For the common person, witnessing ritual death reinforced the idea that survival was conditional. Gratitude became mandatory. Life wasn't a right. It was a loan renewed by blood. In a world ruled by uncertainty, that belief gave shape to chaos, even if it came at a human price. And centuries later, when the civilizations fell and the temples turned to dust, the pattern didn't vanish. It adapted. The gods changed names, the altars changed shapes, but the instinct stayed. If the world breaks, something must be offered. Sacrifice turned symbolic: fasting, prayer, penance, currency. We stopped using hearts and started using hours, money, and attention. The same trade, sanitized. So, did it work? Maybe not in the way they thought. The rain still falls according to physics, not prayers. The sun rises whether or not anyone bleeds for it. But something deeper persisted. The human conviction that meaning can be built out of loss, that pain can purchase order, that chaos can be negotiated with ritual. In that sense, every sacrifice did work. It kept people believing long enough to build pyramids, plant fields, write myths, and imagine gods who cared enough to listen. The gods may have been silent, but belief itself answered back. And that, more than any offering, is what kept the world turning. And so, the smoke from the altar fades, and the chanting of the priests dissolves into the quiet of your own room. You've walked the path of the chosen, from the strange honor of a final feast to the cold, unforgiving stone of the altar. You've seen how civilizations, in their desperate attempt to control a world of chaos, could turn a human life into a divine transaction, a message sent to the gods in the universe's most brutal currency. It's easy to look back and see only the horror, but in a strange, unsettling way, it was a system born of profound belief. These weren't just acts of cruelty, they were acts of cosmic maintenance, performed by people who genuinely thought the fate of the world rested on their shoulders and on yours. They were terrified, hopeful, and ridiculously, tragically wrong. What stands out most, when the blood dries and the centuries settle, isn't the violence. It's the logic. The human impulse behind it was always the same: to find order in chaos, meaning in catastrophe. When the rains failed, when the sun hid, when the earth shook, people didn't shrug and say, "That's just how it is." They built entire religions around responsibility. Someone had to pay the bill for reality to keep working. And if the gods wouldn't do it, humans would. With interest. And so they paid. With corn, with gold, with animals, and eventually with each other. Not out of sadism, but out of fear that without giving something back, the balance would collapse. In that light, sacrifice becomes less about death and more about bargaining. A desperate, beautiful, and horrific attempt to prove that existence could be reasoned with. That idea never really died. We've changed the costumes and cleaned up the rituals, but the structure remains. We sacrifice time to careers, sleep to ambition, empathy to ideology. We build systems and call them progress, but the logic behind them hasn't evolved as much as we'd like to believe. We still trade pieces of ourselves for a promise of control. We just do it with calendars instead of altars. History is a mirror, not a museum. When we look into it, we see the same patterns looping through new disguises. Fear turned into structure, pain turned into purpose. The Aztec priest cutting open a chest to keep the sun alive isn't so different from the executive burning through workers to keep the market alive. Both are acts of faith, one in gods, the other in systems. The result is the same, reassurance that the chaos has a master. But the deeper truth is simpler. The world has never needed our sacrifices. The sun would have risen anyway. The rains would have come eventually. The universe doesn't bargain, it just continues. The tragedy of the ancient sacrificer is that they didn't know that yet. The tragedy of the modern one is that we do, and we keep doing it anyway. So as the echoes of those ancient chants fade, and you're left in silence, there's a strange comfort in realizing how small we've always been, and how creative we are at pretending otherwise. Civilization, for all its genius, was built by creatures terrified of the dark. But fear made us invent fire. It made us build cities, write myths, launch satellites, and film documentaries about the very rituals that once terrified us. The same need to understand, to appease, to connect, has driven every step of progress, and every atrocity along the way. You're the descendant of people who looked at thunder and thought it was a god's anger, who watched the sunrise and saw a contract renewed. They were wrong about the mechanism, but right about the emotion. The world is unpredictable. It just doesn't care. And somehow, we've learned to live with that, to find meaning without blood, to replace sacrifice with curiosity. So tonight, as you drift off, think about how far we've come, and how much of us still lingers in the echo of those old drums. The gods may be gone, but the longing that created them is still here, beating quietly inside us. Maybe that's what survival really is. Not conquering chaos, but learning to live inside it without sharpening the knife. Because history, in all its darkness and absurdity, never stopped being about us. The believers, the dreamers, the terrified creatures who kept offering pieces of themselves to make sense of the stars. And though we've traded our altars for algorithms, we're still trying to answer the same question whispered across time. Was it enough?